Hi, everyone. We'd like to welcome our fellow development practitioners and donors and other individuals interested in thinking and working politically, or TWP, and our virtual fireside chat. And some of you know me, I'm Carmen Conley. I am currently the Global Practice Lead for Local Governance at DAI, but I also serve in the role to train and coordinate for our political economy analysis activities. And before we proceed, just a couple of housekeeping items. If everyone could remain muted when they're not speaking, and also keep your video off just for bandwidth reasons, thanks. And also wanted to let you guys know that this will be recorded and we may post the video subsequently on our listserv. And I hope no one has any issue with that. Thank you. The TWP working group, many of you know, but it's an informal group of development practitioners with the objective to learn, coordinate, and advocate for practice of thinking and working politically in development programming at a practical level. We've designed this event to focus on practical knowledge sharing, how TWP is being applied in the field, from the perspective of 4 current or recent chiefs of party from different regions running different types of activities. All of our panelists today happen to be country nationals of the respective project countries. So as the overall facilitator, I'd like to walk you through the flow of the event and introduce our panelists. Whoops. My screen, oh, they're okay. Great, got a screen share. And our TWP working group colleague, Santiago Villaveces, will moderate the meat of the program, the important part, which will include brief presentations from each of our panelists, followed by an internally moderated discussion by Santiago. And that will be followed by hopefully a lively group conversation amongst all of us and / Q&A section. Sorry, Santiago, I forgot to introduce you. So Santiago is a senior advisor for Chemonics Center for Politically Informed Programming. And he is both a field practitioner and an expert in TWP and PEA. So most of you know these terms, but a few of you may not know what we're talking about sometimes. So we did send in the invitation, the follow-up invitation, kind of a definition of terms briefly for thinking and working politically and political economy analysis, or sometimes political economy assessment. And we hope you take a look at that, and there may also be a link provided in the chat. So I'd like to mention our panelists. Aferdita Mekuli, Chief of Party for the USAID Kosovo Transparent, Effective, and Accountable Municipalities Program, also called TEAM, managed by us, DAI Global. Hamdi Ismail Abdulati, Interim Chief of Party for USAID Expanding Access to Justice project in Somalia, implemented by our colleagues at PACT. Eva Matsiko, Team Leader for the UK FCDO, Uganda Equity, Governance, Accountability, Participation, and Performance, or EGAP project, managed by RTI International. And Carlos Morales, former Chief of Party for the USAID Guatemala Biodiversity Project, managed by Chemonics International. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Santiago to talk to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here we are. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Carmen, for the introduction. Welcome everybody. And warm welcome to our 4 panelists, which please, if you can turn your videos on. We can leave the videos on of the 4 panelists as we go through this round. And I'll just mention a little bit of the flow here. So we have 45 minutes. And in this 45 minutes, what we're going to do is in the first 45 minutes. So we have 45 minutes first and then 30 minutes of Q&A. So the first 45 minutes we'll spend between 25 to 28 minutes, and I'll be a little bit of dictator in typekeeping. Sorry for that. I apologize already for all of you, but we need to be, keep the time. So we'll have 25 to 28 minutes in which we'll hear firsthand experiences from diverse topics from each of the COPs. Then after that, what I would like to have is around 17 to 20 minutes in a conversation, in a dialogue between the COPs on questions that I will be posing accordingly to what we've been, accordingly to what we discuss in their presentations. And those last 20 minutes, in which it'll be more of a dialogue back and forth between the 4 COPs, I would like everybody to use that as a platform for the Q&A. So what we want to do is, I know the richness could be infinite, but what we want to do in this event is to sort of pinpoint to a couple of 4 broad topics that we'll be talking with the COPs and then engaging them in this dialogue. So if your questions can be sort of linked to any of these 4, that would be fantastic. So we keep deepening instead of expanding. So the idea of this time together will be deepen these topics instead of expanding to others, if that's okay with you all. So without further ado, I would like to start our conversation. So we're going to touch upon 4 big themes, right? We're going to touch about on the first big theme that we want to touch upon is the use of context awareness tools such as PEAs and adaptive management in action. So understanding how these 2 things are one single unit instead of 2 separate things. So PEA and adaptive management in action, that's a big block that we want to explore. Second big block that we want to explore is a TWP in highly complex environments. So how TWP can be an incredibly useful tool to understand how to navigate in high complex environments in which, right? Second theme, the third theme is what the working part in TWP is all about. And here I want to mention, we've discussed in many different forums about the what is working politically, the working politically part, but this is the working politically part in action. And that's the third big block that we want to discuss. And then finally, the process of embedding TWP into strategy and decision-making within a project. So these are sort of the 4 big blocks. So I would like everybody that is attending to keep your questions sort of related to this, and let's begin our exploration. So I will start with Aferdita. So welcome. Hope you're feeling good.
Yes.
Everything was good?
Yeah, everything's fine. Just for the sake of clarification, why you're asking if I'm feeling good is that because I have 1 member of my family positive in COVID, and this is my 2nd week that I'm isolated, but I'm feeling good. Thank you.
Great. I'm really glad to hear, Aferdita. So, yes. Aferdita, I wanted to ask you if you could address this issue of PEA and the adaptive management in action part by highlighting the great, your insights of what you guys been doing in Kosovo in your program. So off to you.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, before I start in action and discuss about PEA and adaptation, I would like just to provide an overview of the project, just so you know that why PA, why the adaptation, and what we targeted. Our project is 5-year funded project, started in 2017, will conclude in 2022, and at the core, we are aiming to improve the procurement fairness, transparency, and oversight by providing comprehensive assistance across all Kosovo municipalities, which are 38. We have different actors from the local level to the central level that we work, and we try to push these reforms in public procurement. When we started the project at the beginning in 2017, in Kosovo, the citizens, the civil society organizations, the private sector contractors, government oversight officials reported that public procurement is problematic. It is an area where the clientelism, nepotism, fraud, and other forms of corruption are believed to be pervasive. To address these weaknesses in the system, it was very critical for Kosovo since approximately 40 to 60% of the government's budget at both the municipal and national level is spent through public procurement. At the beginning of the project, when we faced and when we collected all this information, we think that we started to implement the PEA from the day one in order to identify, define, and identify the problems. And the focus of the PEA was public procurement modernization in Kosovo, with emphasis on procurement at the municipal level. We learned through our initial PA that one fundamental assumption of our project, which was that there was a functioning e-procurement system in the country and it's implemented, turned out to be false. We quickly adapted and reallocated resources to fix the e-procurement system, but encountered severe resistance and stubbornness from the government procurement agency, which in Kosovo we call them Public Procurement Regulatory Commission. They did not trust the vendor who implemented the platform and who built the system. They didn't trust us because we were a new USAID project, and they had no incentive to go forward with the procurement. In fact, we understood later on in the process, while working with them closely, that they were just about to switch off and shut down as a whole the e-procurement system and go back to the paper-based process, which would be, for a country like Kosovo, would be a step backward. We have taken all the risk and insisted against the request of the government procurement agency to postpone the implementation of the e-procurement platform, since constantly and continuously the platform had issues and problems. This was a case of a more kind of normative view of reforms, of what ought to be compared to more strategic and programmatic approach, or let's say best practice versus best fit. The government was waiting for the perfect system, and we many times we talked about this with our first chief of party, Stephen, that the government is always waiting for a perfect system to be dropped in by parachute. But we knew that the successful implementation was going to be messier, grounded in contextual realities, with organic change and good enough reform based on what is politically feasible as well as technically sound. In order to get broad support for reform and align incentives, we had to take a look at the broad array of Kosovo institutions, power dynamics, and set incentives that impacted our reform efforts. We decided at the time that the best way to approach this problem, to have a resolution for this problem, would be to engage the host government, public procurement regulatory commission or procurement agency, government procurement agency, to identify glitches in the system, refined through an ongoing process of reflecting and learning. And we didn't decide only to fix the problems, if we may say, fix the e-procurement platform and system, to fix the system for them actually, but we wanted to take a facilitative role to empower and equip the government agency to do it themselves. Our approach was we should let procurement agencies sink or swim, we would call, and we were aware that the platform had problems, but on the other hand, we plan to engage experts to support PPRC and collaboratively identify and address the problems with the platform. Because of this decision, although the risk was very high, as I mentioned before, because the platform had constantly problems, that were able to fix, we would lose the public trust, and if we wouldn't be able to fix it, we would lose the public trust and the project and at the government procurement agency. Today, as we speak, electronic procurement is a reality, and it's implemented 100%. Eliminating the traditional paper-based procurement process. And here we are talking about billions of euros value and thousands of procurement activities that are initiated throughout the platform. As a result of this joint efforts with the government, currently, Kosovo in 2018 actually marked a breakthrough change in public procurement when the government decided to make and to go a step further, and instead of only implementing all procurement activities online, 100%, they also made it mandatory for all public contracts to be actually online and available for the civil society and the citizens. If we,
1 minute.
Sorry,
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay,
Yes.
Did we have challenges in doing that? And well, yes, we had a lot of challenges. The greatest challenge was for people, also in our team, not in a government side, to feel comfortable adapting and continuously learning to create an environment when it's safe for people to make a mistake, learn from the mistakes and adjust. Office culture in Kosovo puts a heavy emphasis on the infallibility of the leader in the office. I mean, key to thinking and working politically was creating rapid cycle of learning and reflection, and it was kind of in the heart of the project. So we did it constantly, not only with the traditional allies like our grantees and our partners, but also outside. So and the good thing with adaptation in this process is that we actually embedded innovation, we would call it, in our approach was that we have included all the activities on monitoring, evaluating, learning, and adapting in the work plan, and creating a calendar of these, I will call from now on MELA, which is MELA, activities. It sounds obvious and banal, but this turned out to be a very powerful tool, as the officer who was in charge for MELA made sure that many pause and reflect sessions and learning summit with partners are proceeded in time. The inputs are actually addressed and are embedded into the activities and reflected into activities and into our work. So we had used, I think that just because of our approach into these problems, we think that we have achieved kind of more, the biggest bang for the buck. I think this is what Stephen constantly was mentioning in all of our meetings, but also using the momentum and breaking this kind of traditional way of engaging with the traditional partners and traditional stakeholders, but going beyond and above just for the sake of achieving more results and higher outcomes from the project. So I think
Yes.
Can I continue?
No, we will have more chance in
Okay.
the dialogue, but so we'll keep everybody will keep hearing from this example from Aferdita, so no worries. This is sort of a first introduction to the theme. So I would like to pass on now to Hamdi, and if he could talk about, Hamdi, if you could turn your video on. And if you could talk a little bit about thinking, working politically in highly complex environments. So we'll hear from Hamdi's insights working in Somalia in two aspects, in highlighting the access to quality information in such complexity, and then in navigating the internal complexity of government engagement. So Hamdi, on to you. You have 6.5, 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, Santiago. Hi, everyone. This is Hamdi Abdullahi. I work with EAJ program, Expanding Access to Justice program in Somalia. I will quickly touch the two areas highlighted by Santiago. And let me start with the information bit. We use a couple of different methodologies and methods in collecting information that is relevant to expanding access to justice program. And just to give you a general overview of what EAJ is a 5-year program. It started in 2018, and we work with both state and non-state justice actors in Somalia. We use a couple of different approaches when collecting information for the program, and one of them is the use of BEA, and also we also use extensively research. We have a very strong component on research, and specifically learning issues around the use of justice in different settings. And just to give an overview for the colleagues, Somalia is a plural justice system context where you have 3 parallel justice systems: the Sharia, the traditional justice system, and the state justice system. So for us to understand more issues around the perception and choice and barriers, we have a pillar for our research which deals with these issues. For BEA, we use extensively what we call topic-based or monthly briefs, which we normally use to look at issues around, for example, what's happening in that specific area and how it's affecting our program. And if there is anything that is directly linked to what we do currently, how do we adapt that? And after every BEA and research, we have what we call CLA, collaborating, learning, and adapting, just to validate the assumptions and the things that we learned from that BEA as well as the research. So what we have is basically a group of consultants which is based in different areas that the program is working. And for those consultants, sometimes we call it informant networks and informant individuals. They are the people who provide to us information around specific issues that we think is relevant to what we're doing at that specific area, at that specific time. And basically, those individuals are people who have a close working knowledge and access to the local authorities, in particularly the justice institutions, which is the institutions that our program is closely working with. Just to mention also, our Somali project staff also plays a very critical role in in actually getting this information, and not only getting it, but also analyzing it and then understanding it in a way that's relevant to our program. So we have program staff who are based in different parts of Somalia, and in that sense, we have a good grasp on situation and the contexts and detailed information around specifics in that specific area. We are currently operating 3 different locations, and for each of the locations that we are working in, we have a staff who are based in that location, and consultants also. Just to mention also, one of the things, an example is that the BEA, as well as the research informed EAJ, during the start of the program was more legal aid organization focused program. But later on, as we move forward, and after the inception, we realized the fact that it will be very difficult for us to operationalize a concept that we had in mind at that time, which was access to justice coordination platform, which is a platform that brings both state and non-state justice actors together. And from the design, since the program was designed only for legal aid organizations, we thought that platform will face a big challenge in actually implementing the things that we were planning to do at that time with the legal aid organizations. So we involved people like prosecutors and the Minister of Justice, who normally have that responsibility in coordinating the prisoners, and the police. And the reason of what we included this group in our work was basically we saw that there could be a potential spoilers on the things that we are planning to do. And to avoid all those, we thought it would be very good to bring them in this coordination forum, so they will see and hear what's happening and what the legal aid organizations need from them and how they can assist. And for us to get all those details, we have to start from the app, which is the ministers and chief justices. And we were able to start that relationship at that level, and we found it very helpful, both the research as well as the BEE, to help us understand more on how we want to engage with those higher level political positions and the kind of message that we want to actually put there. Just to also, sorry?
1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute, yes. Just to add on that, one of the things that we also are able to actually put on the table was the use of Sharia, and that was something informed by our research. We have a couple of research that was coordinated by our research team leader, and we are happy to share with the wider community to actually see what we came up and what we learned from that process. Just to quickly look at the government engagements, it's very clear Somalia is very challenging. You will have a lot of cases where there is a constant reshuffle around the ministries. You have a minister that you agreed something today, and in a matter of 2-3 days, that minister is gone. Not only that, but also recently you will see a lot of trends where a number of NGO leaders are now becoming government officials. So maybe on a Monday, you met an NGO leader, an executive person, to discuss something on that maybe you and his program and his organization and the program were planning to work together, but after 4 or 5 days, that person ended up to be the new Minister of Justice because of a reshuffle that happened. So those are the day-to-day things that we deal, but we also realize the role of the advisors, because advisors are positions that are there and easily can help you to influence these and deal this constant reshuffle around the ministers and DGs. Back to you, Santiago.
Thank you. Thank you, Hamdi. Thank you. We'll be back with you in shortly. Eva, so I wanted to ask you if you could just tell us a little bit about what the working part in TWP is all about. So specifically, how have you used TWP in the Uganda program to boost the program's political leverage in navigating with different actors who have contesting positions in different things. But please.
Yes, Santiago, thank you for the question. So very quickly, the program was a 7-year program funded by USAID and DFID. And DFID now FCDO. And the accountability loop in Uganda. And to understand the accountability loop, it has, this is how it's designed. The Ministry of Finance releases money to many entities. They implement against that framework. At the end of the year, the Office of the Auditor General comes and audits them on how they spent the money and also engages them. And then it produces a report that goes to Parliament. And Parliament then reviews what was done and maybe makes some recommendations about what they could have done better and what they should do differently and where what money went. And then it goes to Ministry of Finance. So we had this long loop from the national level down to the local governments, to entities, then back up. But clearly, it was not aggressive enough to be a deterrent to corruption, which is a big problem in Uganda. So what we had to look for is, okay, what are the potential entry points, using a lens that looks at where the potential entry points, that what are the things that can incentivize different actors to do what they're doing and even beyond that. So we went to the parliamentary entity. They have a legal mandate to shared by the opposition. So it's in their interest to demonstrate how effective they are in holding government accountable. So we worked with that interest. In addition, individual members of committees wanted to work to perform better than their colleagues from other parties or their colleagues who they found in parliament before. So we worked with them. Those who wanted to run fast, we ran fast with them. And the slower ones also, we went at their pace, but there were incentives there that worked. Another entity was the public procurement. It was a new entity, dynamic, willing to explore. So they were very open to innovations and changes and things like that, things that would make them more effective. They explored many innovations, working together with, we discussed, some innovations they might have, and we tried them. We started with small sort of trials over smaller local governments, and where that worked, increased scale. So we built into that incentive that they had to shine as a new organization that performs, that, that is effective. Now at the local level, we had a challenge. We had a twofold mandate to undertake accountability, strengthening efforts, but also local government strengthening efforts. So when we came with the heart of accountability to the local government folks, they resisted us. They were not very happy with our interventions. They thought we were there to quote unquote spy on them, make life difficult for them, etc. So we realized that that hat needs to be worn by someone else. And so we let Parliament play that role, and we came on the other side. So the local government officials the heads are appointed officials. And there was a new law that passed in 2015 that said you had, every year, they would renew your authorization to manage funds. So it was in the interest of every accounting officer not to be blacklisted to manage funds. So we tapped into that interest of working with them to make sure that they are not blacklisted for managing funds. The second one, there was a national performance assessment that also came into force in 2016. And that performance assessment meant that different districts were compared with others on how they performed on managing finance, on reporting on time, on being transparent to the public, on various criteria. So it was in the interest of the chief accounting officer to make sure that their district shone. And the politicians as well wanted to tell their electorate that, look, we were the best performing district in this region, or we were number 13. Uganda has about 130 districts. So if you said we're number 13 out of 130, that worked for you as a politician, but also worked for you as a staff. So looking for those incentives that were there in the system and working with them, using them to increase engagement, to take advantage of opportunities, to profile leaders and showcase those that were performing well and say, look, in the last assessment, X district, were moved from position X from position 16 to position 10. And that working with those helped create an energy that was not there in the cycle. An energy that we didn't have. We didn't have that energy. We had to look for things within the context that could generate that energy and drive performance. And another thing we tried to do was involve the media. So the media, no politician wants bad press, and neither did the local government officials, the leaders at the local level who are appointed from the center, want bad news to move from the local level to the center. So when you had the media engaged, you had another dynamic where people try to perform to make sure that they don't get bad press. So working with those various dynamics helped us work within. We did it. There were no new laws. There were no new laws created, but we thought, what is it? We looked for what it was that drove the different leaders and the different actors, and using PA, RTI trained staff, all staff, on how to use this methodology so that we could continually apply it as we went along and take advantage of opportunities. Some of these laws came into place mid-term the program. So we're saying, hey, there's this that happened. How do we take advantage of this? And how do we ride on it? So that's an example of something.
Thank you, Eva. And lastly, Carlos, I wanted you, if you could turn your video on and to talk about a little bit about your experience in the process of embedding complex information that results from PEAs and other tools into things that are accessible for strategic and tactical decision making.
Of course, Santiago, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share my experiences in the application and the use of this invaluable information that the PA and the TWP is providing us in the context of a field project. Well, I think it's the best and the worst of times for decision makers. Increasing piles of data, advanced analytic, intelligent algorithms are providing organizations with powerful new inputs and methodologies for making all kinds of decisions. But the organizations are growing and the complexity of the digital communication are growing too. And it's a recipe for poor decisions sometimes. For example, disengagement. I have heard this presentation hundreds of times. Or paralysis. I am blocked because I have too much data. Or anxiety. The risk I am taking is very high. So in these few minutes, I'm going to summarize the way we have faced this challenge, especially in the area in which the PA and TWP is bringing us more information that we can use in the project. So Santiago said something about no PowerPoints, but he didn't say anything about flashcards. So I have my flashcard. Okay. So number one is design. Okay, design. Okay, the objectives of the PA must be very, very clear and achievable, and the whole team must know their roles and functions, as well as how the information will be used and analyzed. Number two, instruments. A key step in the building of is the capture instruments, because this will contain the key information of the stakeholder. if you don't have a common agreement about how to capture and bring the data to the project, it will require a huge effort to standardize a large collection of different formats. Number 3, it's quality assurance. The capture team, which are ideally members of the project, have a leader who ensures the quality and consistency of the information before the consolidation of the data. Number 4, the construction of the database. Defining and having a database of any time. I mean, it could be an Excel, it could be SQL, but you must to have a database ensuring that the consolidation of all information is somewhere. That is absolutely crucial to develop the following analysis. Okay, now the analysis. So using the qualitative or quantitative methodology that define trends, patterns, clusters, points of reference of the information will offer us the raw material for the discussion and the final decision making, the pause and reflect. So then the discussion spaces with the team, with the donors, with the main implementers, in which you agree the condition of the context, expectation, needs, frustrations, or any other conditions coming from the PA information, which affects our implementation strategy and puts the results of the project at risk, and what actions we will take to reduce the risk to improve our impact. Okay, number 7. Finally, the decision making. Now it's time to modify activities in the best case or part of the strategy in the worst case scenario, which includes strategic objectives sometimes that are linked with indicators and goals. Number 8, communication and positioning the change. Okay, in your periodic meetings, in your quarterly meetings, monthly meetings with your local groups, you must to discuss and agree the changes and listen if there is any variation or any other fact that we didn't consider at the beginning. Number 9, implementation and alignment. Okay, so it's time to getting things done, and once again, align the project, implementing, aligning, implementing, aligning. So that's the short cycle of the project. And finally, learning what we have learned about the whole period, how we are going to improve our performance in the next period, what best practices we have discovered, and finally, how we can measure if the decisions we have taken during the year based in the information, on the information, has been the right ones. And that's it, Santiago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. I love the adaptation. I think you know, TWP is all about adaptation within rules. So my rules were were no PowerPoint presentations, but here is the wonderful innovation and adaptation of the flashcards, which actually worked pretty well, Carlos. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you if you could just keep your cameras on, Carlos and Eva and Hamdi, so we can engage now in a conversation amongst yourselves. And I just want to trigger some ideas, and I would like just you to feel free to give us your insights around these ideas. And then if you hadn't had, if I cut you off and you still wanted to talk about some other things, please use this time to do so. So I think, the biggest thing that wraps everything that all of you have been discussing is the issue about embedding. And I think this is a key the key part that all of us, you know, in the field and as implementers, our donors, and so forth, are always struggling with. We know the concepts, we know the procedures, the sequences of TWP, we know the instruments, but the challenge is in the embedding all this stuff so it makes sense within the project lifecycle. It's not a one stand thing that we do at some point and then we forget about it, but the embedding. And here I wanted to ask all of you, you know, what have been the most salient challenges in embedding? And you can think about different aspects, right? You can think about the challenges, the internal challenges. Embedding, from what I hear from your presentations, is that embedding needs an integration with the team. It needs leadership inside the program. So if you could maybe address some of these issues, challenges and insights that you have around this issue. The second issue about embedding is that it also requires an integration with the client, which is fundamental, and this is not always happens. Sometimes the project is in a different place than the client. Sometimes it's the opposite. So the close integration with the client. What have been your challenges and your insights around this? Then the third question is, if you know, which other ways you use to embed this as a process within the program, sort of on the lines of what Carlos was explaining. If you all can give us some more insights on that. I think this is enough. These issues are enough. So I want to leave it open. So you know, who would like to tackle what? So I want to leave it open. But if nobody comes forward, then I'll have to exercise my power, which I don't want to. But so please jump in.
All right, I'll jump in. So one of the things that worked for us was the training of all staff on these concepts and the different processes. Like functionally, how do you work a PA process and getting everyone the skills they need to think about it and do it. And you asked for what are some of the challenges that you find. One of them is culture. For example, the notion that I think Aferdita mentioned it, the notion that because I'm the team leader or this is the component head, so they have all the answers regarding that area or that section, that issue. And therefore, having an honest intellectual discussion and argument about whether this works or not, whether we need to change approach and why. For some people, it's a struggle, especially those who had no previous experience working like this. And so nurturing a culture where there's open discussion is something you as the leader must make sure you walk in and encourage the whole team to do so. So ensuring that that culture is nurtured can be a challenge, because some people get it easily. Some people want their work plan, how they planned it in January, November, to work through that. And so just helping people be flexible is one of the challenges. Sure.
Thank you, Eva. How about you other guys?
Just to echo Eva, because she mentioned, and I actually stopped a bit my elaboration on how we actually embedded, as you mentioned, TWP and working. As I mentioned earlier, yes, the working culture in Kosovo was such that, you know, you have a team leader, you have a COR, or you have a minister or the mayor who is responsible for everything. He is right all the time, and you know, we should all just ask him, and then if that person is on the top of the organization, he has to be right. We didn't like that kind of approach. We used the TW approach since day one and created an office environment that was conducive for learning, debate, and intellectual exchange. No one got punished in the office for disagreeing with the boss or disagreeing with the superior in the office. People were free to learn from data and evidence that proved that their earlier assertions were wrong, or it was not easy to make this shift to continuous learning orientation. And if someone required you know, many times leadership to continue and repeat these rules within the team, that, you know, we are here to learn from each other, and that everybody is free to share their opinions. We can debate with one another, disagree, get passionate, and then still meet for coffee together later and remain professional and collegial. The team was able to see the benefits of our learning approach, Santiago. The benefits of TWP was also noticeable with the Government Procurement Agency and the board members, who were not convinced that the e-procurement platform was the correct solution. I mean, the board members of the Government Procurement Agency were very much dependent on the technical team, IT, regarding actually the functionalization of the platform. The IT team were not so interested to functionalize this platform, and the board members were then informed that they were actually disinformed about this, so the information were hidden from the board member. But then, after they realized that this was an misinformation, we gathered both the team within the PPRC, within the procurement agency, and IT technical team, and we discussed these problems and advantages and shortcomings of the system, as well as benefits of having this system. You know, within the PPRC, and why they should benefit from the reform of public procurement. We developed also the problem-solving plan together, and which made the board members relax, realizing that the problems with the platform are finally solvable. Again, these are examples of best fit approaches grounded in contextual realities, more organic than good enough, reform based on what is politically feasible. And this shows our constantly how we actually implemented the facilitative approach and our approach on fostering relationship and building trust as a measure of gradual progress towards achieving the higher level outcomes. I must also note something that without the COR support throughout the process, which it was very big support to our project from our COR, I don't think that we would be able to actually implement these kind of, and have all these adaptations, because our project adaptations weren't just a small adaptation or minor adaptations, but also adaptation to have a new partner on board, which was not even foreseen in the original scope of the project. So I think that because of our engagement from the day one, also with the COR and all the stakeholders, I think this was why we were successful on shifting actually a lot of our activities and refining the program, and we are where we are right now. One of the most successful projects in Kosovo. My 5 cents, Santiago.
Absolutely, there were more than 5 cents. Thank you, Aferdita. Any thoughts from you?
Yes, yes, Santiago. This is Hamdi. Just to add one challenge, I think as you have maybe seen so many other different post-conflict contexts, but one common problem which we still continue to try learn and adapt is the constant change on the leadership of the government, where you have a situation where you invest time and energy in building a relationship with a minister or a DG, and then you ended up seeing that minister or DG change it in a matter of 2-3 months. And just to be very practical, for example, now we're working with Ministry of Justice in about 2 years, and we have 3 different ministers in one of the federal member states and 2 ministers in the federal level. And you will see the frequency of the change of the leadership. Same applies also to the DGs, which is the Director General positions, as well as the BSs, which is the permanent secretaries. So the change in the leadership affects quite a lot on what we plan and how we actually plan, where you have an engagement plan set together with a minister, but in a matter of 3 months, new minister comes and he tells you, these are not my priorities. These are the priorities for the former minister. You have to start again from zero in convincing him why you want, for example, nanny-state justice actors to be part of the overall justice service delivery. And yeah, and that's quite a challenging. We're trying to adapt, and that's one of the things that I was mentioning in my 6 minutes earlier talk, the role of the advisors. So back to you again, Santiago.
Right, thank you. I think we're going to, for the sake of time, we're going to open up now for the Q&A session. Carmen?
Hi, guys. Thank you, Santiago and the panel. Yeah, these things always go quicker than you think. We did want to open it up for just about 15 or 20 minutes of questions from the audience. And the way that we will do that is if you could please put your questions in the chat. I will try to sort of curate like questions and throw them over to Santiago in the panel. While we do that, and I take a look at the questions coming in, Santiago, why don't you throw out another question while we do this?
Okay, so maybe Carlos, if you want to say something.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Santiago. It's just trying to answer your question about how to embed in, and I will say, let's move one step forward. How to empower all the team and your stakeholders about the information you have produced through the PA and the other TWP tools. And from my perspective, the first step is the designing. I mean, if the objective, which how you or why you are gathering the information is clear and you are pushing the right buttons, that's a great start. And secondly, the analysis of the data, it's a powerful tool because it will give you an instrument. The hard data give you the statements to discuss, to persuade, to be compelling into the discussion. You have something in your hands that it's really powerful to convince the people that what you are proposing will improve the impact of your project. And finally, yeah, as the other gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, Handley and Aferdita and Eva mentioned, leadership is crucial in how to implement finally the decisions. It needs a lot of leadership.
Yeah.
Go back
Thank you.
to you, Santiago.
Thank you. So we have one question actually from a colleague of mine, Antonio. How has your experience been with the client? This is for obviously for implementers. When the analysis, sorry, my chat just shifted. And your experience with the client when the analysis leads the team to recommend changes in the scope, the actual scope of work, or changes to counterparts that have been identified by USAID during the design phase. So maybe we can hear about some of the practical elements of working with the client, particularly in scope redesign or rather adaptation that might lead to contractual or scope changes. Santiago, do you want to throw that over to one of your panelists?
Sure, I guess it's
I mean, I know Aferdita probably has something to say about that.
Yeah, I just don't want to be the only one speaking, but yes, we have, as mentioned in my discussion earlier, we had one new partner on board, and it's not only that we had to adapt the scope, but we had to, in the middle of the project, to completely shift and adjust our M&E plan. Because I mean, we have to consider that, you know, when we designed in the beginning of the project the M&E plan, then many of the, and how we adapted on the way, then we couldn't actually 100% present the results to the to the primer or to the original scope. As I said, the crucial part here is constant and cooperation and work with the CR. Because then the shifts and the changes are well translated into the actions within the contract. Luckily, we didn't had, you know, even our work plan. I would like to cite our CR, who would constantly say, like, a work plan is not written in stone, which means that we can shift even the work plan, so we can actually adapt with and embed all these changes within the project. Now, the core of the project scope was saved. Actually, it's only what was actually shifting without approach were a few partners that we had to add. So it's not that the complete scope was shifted, so we could work around it and we could actually renegotiate with a mission. That's why we didn't enter into this contractual agreement on that aspect. So the core remained the same, our aim remained the same, all the components remained the same. It's just that we shifted, actually, we added more partners into the play, and we have adjusted our work plan to actually match the reality on the ground. So if I have understood well the question.
Thank you. We have another general question to the panel, and then a couple of specific questions to individual panelists. So Eric Viala is asking us, how do you engage spoilers? And how do you find commonalities between their interests and the agenda or the goals or objectives of the project? Some more practical examples. I know Carlos touched and Hamdi, I think, both touched a bit on this. Over.
Yes, I can mention one. I can mention one example. We were working with different state justice institutions here in Somalia, and I think one clear message that comes every now and then from them is the whole justice is something that state manages. So to counter on that, and there was a couple of actually groups that we thought were at that time spoiling the work that an Access to Justice Committee, which is a platform that brings together state and non-state justice actors, were actually influencing in a very negative way. So what we used was our research arm, which is a periodic research, and that helped us quite a lot because we were able to get numbers and influence on the different justice options and how people are using the level of cases that are going on daily basis to non-state justice actors. That's the Sharia, the combination of Sharia and the Somali traditional justice system compared to the state justice system, and how we want to continue supporting those to make sure individual justice and rights are achieved. So I think that was a way that we were able to confront in a more influence approach to the other people who were on the other side of the table, and I can confidently say that worked well for us.
Thank you, Hamdi. There's a specific question for Ava from Suzanne. How are you capturing or measuring the internal TWP learning, driving the learning culture? Is what you've laid out is impressive, Ava. Do you see your team modeling this culture internally, this culture of debate, which she's calling horizontal management versus hierarchical management with partners?
Yes, so we had a number of tools, which were part of the program life. After action reviews, then we had quarterly meetings within the team, then we had annual pause and reflect sessions. We had those ones, but it is important to have both the structured meeting and the environment that allows the discussion to go on, and the willingness to within the team, especially, I think leadership is key. Leadership that creates the environment that yes, I know many projects already have this inbuilt, but the culture within the institution does not allow it to happen. And I have a colleague, for example, one of the team leaders, he would say, okay, we are coming with an open slate now at the beginning. Yeah? Let's have an open slate. Where should we go? What we learned last year? And he would have rigorous and intensive debate within his unit. And of course, it was new for many people. But after some time, people realize that you're honest about this discussion. You're honest. You're willing to let go of your own positions for what others think works. And you all celebrate together when it works. So building that that culture, you have the formal steps. I think most projects now have the formal steps, but you need to also build the environment that allows that to flourish. And we have, RTI has built a practice where you can have a baseline PA if you want. They're short. You can embed questions within specific assessments that we need to answer specific question or very targeted assessments. And now in this COVID environment, we've had to do some remote PAs, having discussions on Zoom or via the phone, or etc. So there are very many tools. But in addition to those tools, you need to nurture the environment where you can have honest, candid discussions, and where there's flexibility and ability to implement. It's also frustrating to discuss changes if you can't implement them. So you have the flexibility both in budget and with your COR or AOR to make those changes.
Great, thank you. We have a question specifically for, I actually mentioned Santiago, but it's this idea of incentives, which obviously was mentioned throughout each of the presentations. can any of the participants speak more concretely to how they incentivize their stakeholders?
All right, I will take over since I have actually elaborated at the beginning of the discussion that as a project we couldn't provide any incentives like they used to. I mean, see with other donors for 20 years, for example, in Kosovo, all these agencies were used to get computer desks, tables, and just name it. But our project wasn't like that. Our project couldn't provide these kind of incentives to the partners and couldn't actually provide that kind of assistance. I think that what actually made it happen, what happened was that the counterparts see, the opportunity to, because they were so bad, they were in such a bad situation, criticism from all the sides, so they seen themselves, and also we used as a window of opportunity for them to improve, for them to start doing something with their own organization. In our case, to functionalize the electronic procurement, which they have committed to, but they couldn't. So I think from both sides we use this window of opportunity, and this is kind of, let's call it, they seen it as an incentive because they started to see the results of functionalizing the platform. If we talk to them now, I mean, from the organization that wanted to shut down the system, now they are actually initiating the transparency initiatives within the procurement government agency. What they are doing, they are actually developing the system tools so they can share automatically the procurement data with the public. So this shift, it was challenging in the beginning, at the beginning of the project, and working with them. But as we started to work closely, and then they saw like small gains of our work together, they actually started to actually do it without any other incentives. So they see it as incentive, the improvement. They saw it as incentive, the how the situation gradually shifted from low performing to a higher performing organization themselves. I think this is what comes to my mind at the moment. Otherwise, I mean, as I mentioned, we weren't the project that will provide incentives like traditional incentives to our counterparts.
Thank you. I think Eva also mentioned something about, instilling a sense of competition. So I think that was at the regional or the district level. Maybe Eva, you could unpack that for a second.
Right. So there was a system that was initiated. It was a government system to assess local governments every year. What we did is sort of highlight it and profile it and create a community in regions where, they were saying, okay, who's performing best in this region? And so that the traditional sort of culture and pride for a certain district to perform better than the other was something we tapped into, and it was effective. It was regional competition, even when there was a national. And the incentives, those incentives, when you're able to tap into either institutional incentives or individual incentives in a way that maximizes project results, it's much, the gains are much longer than, providing a desk and a computer and, the sort of some of the other incentives that can be provided traditionally. But it also, I think the restriction on projects to doing this forces and also fosters to look to see how we can engage, how we can partner with them in a way where they see us as valuable colleagues, valuable partners. It forces you to look for where their interests, how can I be of help? And how can your interests and my interests align so that we both achieve results? It really pushes the program to be, and the team to be innovative, to be responsive, to be available, because the needs sometimes arise in places where you didn't foresee.
Thank you so much. And we have a question also for Carlos, specifically how to best keep track of sensitive PEA type information, such as in a project database, and how do you regularly update that, and what key staff has access to that information? So I think this goes to the question of both integrity and accuracy of the information, the process of updating it. And this wasn't asked, but also I would add in there how broadly that information is shared with stakeholders, whether that be in writing or in presentations. So over to Carlos for that.
Thank you, Carmen. Good morning. This is a very good question. Okay, so first of all, we as managers, we must to have this internal process, right? So we know who is the owner of the database, how we are going to perform the quality, the quality assurance, how we are going to put everything together. Then technology, so where we are going to put the information. So the database is a matter of really technology in terms of what tools are you going to use to put everything together to analyze after that the information. So the question is, once you have analyzed the information and you have that's so important thing in your hands, how you are going to use that information and how you are going to communicate that information. And that's I think there is no just one answer for that. Initially, because we need to understand clearly internally what kind of information is really useful to improve the project and what kind of information is really sensitive and is something that we can keep for us and the donor. Secondly, how we are going to communicate to whom. I mean, not everything should be communicated to the whole range of stakeholders, because some information is depending on specific results, just for instance. So that's a matter of how we are going to organize the communication and the engagement of the stakeholders and the team with the information we are going to share. Fourth, finally, how you are going to use the information, because at the end, the important thing is how we are going to react, what you are going to implement, what it is going to change. In that matter, well, we all have our mechanism of supervision, and everyone knows what is the framework. We have KPRs, KPIs, periodically, weekly meetings, monthly meetings. We have an open channel, and that's quite important. We have an open channel with our stakeholders. So sometimes there is something which is not well received. So it's very important to hear from the stakeholder directly to the project. If there is teeny greeny information that wasn't well received, or we can improve, or they feel uncomfortable with that. And finally, that's a human conduct. I mean, if you have information, you have power, and sometimes it's mostly impossible to control the whole team about how to say to whom. But that's a matter of management, I said. And finally, well, that's CLA it's about. I mean, how you are learning and how you are adapting according to the information. A decision which is taken without information is a high risk decision. A decision taken with so information, but in the right time, is a better decision. If you are taking a good decision, but very late because you are expecting to analyze everything to take decision, maybe it's too late. So it's a lot of variables to answer that question, which is a very good question again, and I hope that can give some light about. Thank you, Carmen.
Okay. We have just a little follow-on to that from Jennifer Swift Morgan asking, how do we make sure that the information in those databases is not abused? And I assume she's meaning maybe by staff themselves. How it goes to the integrity again of the information, and how it is shared in a controlled way and not used for unintended purposes. If Carlos or anyone else has a final comment about that, would be great. And then we'll throw out one more question and we'll have to wrap up. Thanks.
Maybe just to complement my answer, it's really important that inside the project team there is an owner of the process. In our case was the MEL specialist. The MEL specialist was in charge of the logistic and the database and the quality assurance. And the MEL specialist is in charge of how to manage the information. Then the managers by area are responsible about how they are going to manage the information by topic. And then we have people in the areas and they are responsible about how to manage the information by region. So it's like, it's a hierarchical distribution of the information, but it's quite important that inside the project team, there is at least one person in charge to keep the integrity of the information.
Thank you so much. We just have about 5 minutes to wrap up. So I would first like to thank everyone, particularly Santiago, Sharon at Chemonics, who was driving force behind this event, and the other members of the TWP working group, and the panelists, of course. And I'm just going to mention a few key takeaways that came to the top of my mind as folks were talking, and I'd like Santiago to throw in as well. One of the things that really came forward in my mind, and I'm also a former chief of party, although it's been a few years, is that, TWP begins at home. In other words, at times you have to change and shift the culture of your own team. And this involves not only in the way that you manage or set up the project or set up the space for learning and contradiction in a healthy way, but also maybe influences, as Hamdi sort of implied, that the people that you hire and what skill sets they have in terms of knowledge of the local environment. And another big theme I heard was, engagement of the stakeholders in the process. I mean, this is obvious. It's not like we never engaged stakeholders before under traditional technical programs, but, I myself have seen an evolution in how much sharing of PEA information that we do now as compared to previously. that, you know, but also in a sort of thoughtful way, going back to this idea of the integrity of the data and deciding how it will be managed and shared and to whom and under what circumstances. Another theme I picked up on is how important it is to engage your spoilers. I think sometimes when we do PEAs, we look at those, okay, we'll identify the people who are going to spoil our program, and then we'll run away and find our champions and avoid those folks. But a lot of what I heard from the presenters was, no, let's confront that. Let's bring them into the process and figure out a way, to lack of a better word, sort of co-opt or shift those spoilers into champions, or maybe at least neutral actors. So Santiago, I will turn it over to you for a final 3 minutes for your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmen. I think my main takeaway, it can be summarized in a phrase that Eva mentioned, which was generating energy from the context. And here, if we understand the context as not only what it's outside of the project, but what's inside in the, the staff in the project. So the key thing here is how you use the knowledge of knowing incentives, of knowing positions, and use that knowledge to leverage change within your project, within your staff, and within the context in which you're working. And I think that show us precisely this, right? I think TWP in action is precisely what Eva said. I love the phrase, generate energy. And here development is all about generating energy for change. And the question of TWP is, how can we harvest that energy for change if we understand correctly incentives, integration with staff, leadership, process, and embedding things inside this process. So this would be sort of my main takeaway, that I think also encompasses a lot of what Carmen was highlighting. So this is it. So we should be, I think it's time for wrapping up, right?
Wrapping up. Well, thanks again for everyone's participation, and we will, I think, maybe Sharon's on the line, and she can also add any future plans for the TWP working group and for sort of iterative events. Sharon, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm not by my camera, but thank you so much. Thank you, Carmen, for doing a great job facilitating, to Santiago for moderating, and to our amazing COPs, Eva, Hamdi, Aferdita, and Carlos. I don't know about anybody else on the call, but I think it's the first time that I've really seen such in-depth and great discussion amongst a cohort of local COPs. I think it's fantastic. I think it's just inspiring, to be honest, and the work that you do is incredible. So thank you mostly to you guys. Thanks to our people on the line. And yeah, with the Thinking Working Politically community practice, several of us, including Carmen, Lisa, McGregor, and myself, as well as Derek McGrahoff, who's my co-chair. I want to thank you. It's been a quirky year, so you might have heard from us as much. So this is kind of our big one, sort of big event. We will be sending out the some notes, takeaways, and the recording to y'all. And next year, we're hoping to have hopefully a fuller agenda. Please do write to twp.cop@gmail.com. if you want more information, or if you're not on the list. I'm happy to engage you. And I hope the beginning of the year, we're trying to put something together about procurement, what we're seeing in terms of TWP, PEA in procurements, and what that means for implementation. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to next year. So thank you, Carmen. Thanks for everybody for attending.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.